Ave Maria, and welcome to Divine Poetry, a series that explores the chronological parallels between the history of the Catholic Church and the Old Testament. If you're new to this concept, go back and watch my interview with Kevin Davis. The link is in the video description below. To make things more simple, I have divided up church history and the Old Testament into 8 color-coded time periods. Below you can see a scrolling bar with the names, dates, and the Old Testament books for each period. Use this timeline to guide you in each video. The color frame of each video will match the time period that we're discussing. Now, let's start today's episode. Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of Divine Poetry. Today's episode is unique. I'm going to talk about the parallels between Donald Trump, and not just Donald Trump, but he's the headline, he's the premier character here, and the emperor, a certain emperor in ancient Rome. Before we get into that, I have to lay the groundwork because we're going to get into a next level of complexity with these parallels that I didn't really present that well, purposely so. I didn't include that much in my book or in prior episodes here on Catholic Family Podcast. So the book I have, again, is documenting the parallels between, the chronological parallels between the Old Testament, Israel, and church history. But the Catholic Church's history is really nested inside of a larger context of world history. The Catholic Church exists in the actual world. Of course, it's common sense, we know that. So as the history of the church has unfolded, so have events that some of them did touch upon church history, some of them didn't, but they were all contemporaneous nonetheless. So for instance, as things were happening in China in the year 700, you had things happening in church history in the 700s. Sometimes, though, those events would intersect. For instance, you'd have Attila the Hun. Let's give one example. He became part of church history very briefly when he tried to invade Rome, and Pope St. Leo the Great stopped him. So my point, though, is that all of history seems to be prefigured by, all of modern history, or history after Christ, seems to be paralleled by all of the history before Christ. And that includes these non-Catholic actors in events. So that's why I'm going to lay out the parallels here between America and Rome. Now, I already did a video about America and Rome on my own personal YouTube channel, and you can find it here. That they're astonishing. They're chronological. They're highly detailed, and they're amazing. If you know your American history and you know your Roman history, they'll jump out at you once you see the video. It's phenomenal. And also, I did an interview with Kevin Davis on the same subject, and I'll link to both of those videos in the description section of this video. I'm not going to go over all that again because it's just too much. It took me an hour to do it with Kevin. I'm going to dovetail off the very end of those episodes or those videos because that's what I need to focus on for this topic. Right? We're going to be talking about very recent American history, and also the history of the Roman Empire at a certain specific period of time. So then, the next second level of complexity I need to kind of illustrate here is hopefully I'm not getting too technical here, but I should probably explain this because some of you might catch on to this and have a question about this. In the book, Divine Poetry, and in my videos, if you've read it, you might have seen this, but I'll just tell you anyway. I've identified Alexander the Great in 300 BC with Franklin Roosevelt and the Allied Nations. And why do I do that? So Alexander the Great was king for 12 years. He formed the Hellenic League to defeat the Persians. He died suddenly, and after he died suddenly, his empire was carved up into four parts. Franklin Roosevelt, he formed the Allied Nations to defeat the Nazis. He died suddenly, and after he died, Germany was carved up into 4 parts. And there's a lot more to it than that. I'm just kind of brushing over some of the very broad parallels between the two. Anyway, FDR was an American president, and I just told you that he seems to parallel with Alexander the Great, who was a Greek. He was not a Roman. But I'm claiming right now that we're going to be doing the parallels between Rome and America. So how can Rome be both Greece and how can America be Greece and Rome at the same time? And that seems confusing, so I did want to address that. Okay, this took me a while to understand what I was looking at. I've been doing this for like 8 or 9 years now. So I've had enough time to think over these things and write about them and really contemplate them. This is what I think I'm seeing. I'm pretty sure it's there, right? Is that in ancient times, Greece and Rome were separated by thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever, of miles of geographical distance. But the events that were taking place in those two places, they were simultaneously happening at the same time, which is obvious. I mean, there's events happening all over the world right now. I'm not the only one talking, and neither are you the only person watching this video. But what I'm trying to say is that as those events happened contemporaneous to each other in the Old Testament, they also happened in American history, but in the same geographical space. So this is no rule about this, right? This is just kind of what I've noticed. It's a poetry above everything else is poetry. It's not technical. It's not, it's not a rule or a mathematical equation. Anyway, if you look at American history with a certain lens, then you will see Greece. If you look at America with a certain lens again, you will also see Rome. And that's phenomenal. And also, it's not just that easy either. As time goes by, we find ourselves in the certain age of some Old Testament event. So, for instance, in the time of FDR, that was the age of the 300s BC or 200s BC, in that time frame. But as time's been going on, we find ourselves in the age of a different time period. So that leads me to my next point, is what I'm going to be talking about right now. Like I said, it's Donald Trump, prefigured by a certain Roman emperor, which I'll identify in a second. But it's not just Donald Trump, though, because we are in the age of this particular Roman emperor. And I'll just tell you right now, it's Emperor Nero, okay? We're in the age of Nero. So Biden and Trump and many events that are happening contemporaneous to them, headline events, big events, also echo and are parallels with Nero. And you'll see that when I start presenting. I think that's probably enough intro. I don't want to make it too complex, but I think, I have to introduce those concepts to kind of move forward. Okay, so at the time of Nero, Rome had transitioned from a republic to an empire. If you remember, Rome first was founded as a city under 7 kings, and after the king period had a republic period, and then towards just maybe like 20 BC up until Augustus Caesar, Rome transitioned from a republic into an empire, and it did so because it got so rich and so powerful on a global scale that the politicians of Rome just had so much power they couldn't help themselves. The ideas of republic were a facade at that point, and really it was imperial. It was ruled by elites. And of course, we see the same thing happening in America now. America has been transitioning from a republic until, I guess you'd not really call it an empire, although it is an empire. Foreigners say America is an empire. We say it's a republic. Even Mark Twain, I think, has a quote where he says that America can't be an empire abroad and a republic at home. So even he was recognizing it back in the 1800s. It's really full-blown empire right now, but we feel it most of all because we are seeing that the republic's not malfunctioning, right? Everyone's talking about the death of democracy. Liberals are talking about it, and conservatives know the same thing's happening. So America's going that way too, which is amazing in its own right. Okay, now in 60, I forget, Nero was in 50. I don't know when exactly he became emperor, but Nero, he was very popular with the ordinary people, the ordinary people of Rome. And I'm going to read a quote here to kind of prove that. This is a paraphrase from what's his name? Suetonius, I believe is, which is a Roman historian. And by the way, Roman historians are like American news pundits. They had political spin. So you'd have Tacitus and you have other ones, I forget the other ones, Suetonius, but they wrote on different sides of the aisle, so to speak. So you'll see different sides of emperors based on which political spins being applied in the Roman histories. It's really fascinating. Nero, let's see here. The emperor was considered himself to be the first and foremost an artist. Okay, keep that in mind with Nero. He was also paranoid about plots, and he killed anyone who he suspected of being a threat. While Nero was very unpopular with the elites, he was very popular with the poor. The population of Rome and elsewhere in the empire revered the emperor and saw him as their protector. According to Suetonius, the emperor was carried away by a craze of popularity, and he was jealous of all who in any way stirred the feeling of the mob. The philosopher, Epictetus, argued that Nero was an insecure, immature, and unhappy man and needed acclaim. Now, I don't have any particular opinions about Donald Trump. How can I say this? Apart from how we feel about Donald Trump, his detractors are saying the same thing about Trump that they were saying about Nero, that he was insecure, that he wanted attention, that he was an entertainer, and that we also know that the elites hate Donald Trump and the common people love Donald Trump. So there's a lot like Nero there, even to start with. Okay, we have the actor and singer. So Nero was despised by the elites partly because he was an actor and he insisted on singing and giving plays, and the elites thought that was way, way below the dignity of an emperor. The common people loved it. Donald Trump was a reality show star, and common people love that Donald Trump was a reality show star, and he's even carried some of that entertainment value into his political events. He still has that same manner of entertaining people, and the elites hate that Donald Trump was a reality show star. They think that's below the dignity of the upper class American group of the whatever they are, the upper class, inside the Beltway kind of people. Okay, there's so much here. Nero was building this Domus Aurea, which was this mammoth, sprawling, luxurious palace, and of course Trump has Mar-a-Lago and Trump Towers. Nero puts this massive statue outside of his house, extremely over the top, even for Roman standards. And Trump has his name all over his properties. He's very self-promoting. All right, let's see here. I'm moving on. I got to check these off. There's so many of them. All right. Now, remember, I'm telling you, it's not just Trump. It's also Trump and Biden. So it's kind of me get into that. So the hair color is a very simple and easy one. Nero is known as the ginger-haired emperor, and Trump is made fun of as being the orange man. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, now, the Roman fire. Okay, now here we go. So it seems like the COVID disaster and debacle was the great fire of Rome in parallel. And why do I say that? Well, the fire kept on spreading and spreading, and so did apparently COVID. Now, I think what you think about COVID, but it kept on popping up all over the place like the fire did. It destroyed the world's economy, much like the fire destroyed Roman city, and by parallel its economy as well. I'm going to read a quote here about Roman inflation in the time of Nero, and it's interesting because I'll read it in a minute, but it links the Roman inflation in Nero's time with the fire as a result of the fire, at least partly. And we see the inflation in today's world partly responsible or as a cause of the COVID years, as a response to the slowdown of the economy, the supply chain obstacles and problems, and the people quitting work. There's a whole lot of issues going on. I'm not an economist, but I'm sure you've seen that. Anyway, the blame for the fire, Nero is thought to have started the fire, and he wanted to clear out space to build his massive house, his Domus Aurea. And then when the people caught wind of the possibility that Nero's the one who did it, he had to find a scapegoat, so he blamed the Christians for this. Contrast that with the COVID years where, remember, during the start of COVID, we were hearing all about the Great Reset, in Rome, the fire was the Great Reset of Rome. See, the theory is that Nero started that fire to clear out the way so he could build his house. He had to reset the city of Rome with his fire. And after COVID, we had Biden's slogan of build back better. Well, that's what Nero was doing. He was building back Rome, in his mind, better. He was building out a huge complex for himself. So he was also building back better. The suspicion that COVID was part of a plan to implement the 15-minute cities that we're hearing about is similar to Nero taking all of that land in central Rome. He burned it all down. If he did do it, he burned it all down. And in doing so, he wanted to get the people into, more people into less space because he wanted that space. So the Romans who lost their houses had to go somewhere. Consequently, then they're being packed into smaller areas so he could have his space. And that's what the elites have been doing. They want more of God's creation for them to, drive their yachts around in, and I don't know, whatever, right? But they want us common people packed together for easier control, or for whatever reasons, I don't know. But it does resonate very much with Nero. It's kind of something to see. All right, and then we have the inflation. So I'm going to read a quote here about Nero and inflation because his time was highly there was a lot of inflation, unusually much. And I'm going to read this now. During Nero's time, the empire suffered a fiscal crisis starting around 62 AD, stemming from costly conflicts, their war, which one of the reasons why our inflation is going on is because of the war in Ukraine, along with natural disasters and other factors. Okay, this crisis worsened during the Great Fire of Rome, when a large part of the capital was destroyed and the expense to rebuild was enormous. Nero and other emperors debased the currency to supply a demand for more coins, which led to severe inflation. So in ancient Rome, they had coins made of gold or silver. Nero, I think, was the very first one to cut the coins and make them not all pure gold anymore. He would cut them with other cheaper metals. And that caused inflation in Rome. And so we've had inflationary policies of increasing the money supply in America too. But right now, specifically, the COVID year saw so much stimulus getting pumped into the economy that that's likely one of the main reasons for our inflation. Very similar to what Nero was doing as well. He just enlarged the money supply by putting less precious metal in each coin. All right, keep on moving. We have Build Back Better. We did that one. The Great Reset. Okay, now another one. Nero was accused of fiddling while Rome burned, and Trump was accused of doing nothing when Minneapolis was burning down in those liberal riots. He said, listen, they caused a problem, let them deal with it themselves. And the liberals said, hey, you're just fiddling while Minneapolis burns, or when all the other fires and riots were going on in America as well. Or you could also say that Biden shut down the American economy during COVID, kind of fiddling while the world burns. Everyone was losing their jobs. The whole economy was crashing, stagnating. It was a massive problem. And the governments of the world did nothing while it happened. We have, going back to the fire and the blaming. So Nero blames the fire on Christians. And of course, who gets blamed most specifically during the COVID years was the unvaxxed. They pointed the finger at the unvaxxed in hysterical ways. And it very much mirrors what Nero did with the Christians. And also at the same time, I think, if I remember right, it was one of the very first times that I think that traditional Catholics they got onto the radar of the American public. Like there were some couple headlines about the FBI doing certain things in traditional Catholic parishes, and there wasn't very much, but there was some. And I don't remember seeing any American-wide headlines like that until around the COVID years. That's just like how the Christians were really first pointed out to the larger Roman audience after the fire. I mean, the Christians existed in Rome, but most people thought they were just some kind of offshoot or sect of Judaism. They didn't realize quite yet that it was a whole other new religion, different than Judaism. In the minds of the Romans, it seemed like they were just part of the Jewish cult. Similarly, traditional Catholics, if anyone even knew they existed, were just in the minds of the average American. In their minds, it was just some kind of Catholic group, right? But it's starting to be seen that traditional Catholics they're actually different, they're separate. Something's going on with them. And that happened during the COVID years is when that really kind of first came out. All right, moving on here. There's certain, well, let me do the Praetorian Guard. So first, I should say this as well, that I'm not too concerned about exact chronology here because these events are all very close to each other. And so are the events I'm describing in American history. In the Roman events, also very similarly. I'm not too concerned about pinpointing exact month, although the years are very close. We're talking about 64 to 68 AD is what I'm talking about. And in our times, I'm talking about when did COVID start? 2019, 20, up until like 2024, right? So in both instances, I'm talking about within a 5-year time frame. The FBI, the Praetorian Guard, in this time in Roman history, were seen as the kingmakers. They had the power to kind of like appoint emperors. They appointed a Claudius. This is usually the example of Claudius. He was the last person left in the imperial family, and the Praetorian Guard, who were the elite guards of Rome. They were the only military allowed in the capital. And they guarded the emperor. That was their job. But they ended up realizing they had a lot of power in and of themselves to make emperors. So they handpicked Claudius to be the emperor. Claudius couldn't speak. He had a speech impediment. He was old, and he was thrust into the position by the Praetorian Guard. That's just like what happened with Biden. they had no one else to run, so they picked Biden. And now the FBI is covering up for the Bidens, like the Praetorian Guard. So the FBI is like the Praetorian Guard. They're an elite unit, just like the Praetorian Guard. And to prove my point, look at all these headlines from American literature that they've already seen parallels between the Praetorian Guard and the FBI. So I won't belabor that point. All right, I have to fly through because I'm already at 19 minutes. But we have, let's see, Biden, Claudius, okay. Oh, Claudius couldn't speak. Biden can't speak. All right, talked about that. Okay, now Agrippina, that's Nero's mother. Agrippina was a very power-hungry, manipulative, very cold-hearted, murderous woman who did horrible things to get her son Nero to be the emperor. But she wanted power. And that resonates very, very much with Hillary Clinton. So I won't say much more there. We have talked about the inflation. Good. Okay, here's something that I guess will all resonate horribly and it's very sick, but nonetheless it's true. During the time of Nero, he chose a young boy and he pretended he had a surgical process done to this little boy, and then he pretended this boy was a girl, and then he proceeded to marry this boy. His name was Sporus. So need I say any more about what's happening in American history? So we'll leave that alone. And then there are also politicians floating around during this time that are very much like politicians in ancient Rome. For one example is Vitellius. Vitellius was the emperor 2 after Nero, but I'm going to talk about him in a second. Anyway, he was grossly overweight and he was despised by the Romans. Nonetheless, he became emperor. And here you have Chris Christie. They even look alike. Now, I'm not claiming that Chris Christie is going to be the next president. I'm just saying that there's a lot of other like very close parallels happening around this time. All I can conclude here is that we are in the time of the Roman Empire in parallel around 60, like I said, 64, 65, 66, 67 or so AD. I'm going to try to keep it simple, although it must seem amazingly complex already. Believe me, I'm just kind of giving the simple version, so I feel bad about that. Okay, and finally, what am I going to talk about? The last thing that was happening that I want to leave you with is that Nero was deposed. So remember, the elites hated Nero, but Nero was the last one of the Judeo-Claudian dynasty. They had no heirs. So when Nero was deposed, he was declared an enemy of the state, and then there was a huge jump, or a dog pile, so to speak. All these generals came out of the woodwork. They all wanted to be the next emperor. They wanted to establish the next imperial dynasty. So Galba was the first, then Otho, then Vitellius, and after finally was Vespasian, who was the fourth. And it was Vespasian who sent his son Titus to destroy the Jewish temple. Right now we see both Trump and Biden being threatened with political death. Biden, they want to get rid of him, but they have no one else to run. That's just like Nero. They wanted to get rid of Nero, but they didn't have anyone else to replace him. Exactly what's happening with Biden. And Trump, they're getting ready to declare him an enemy of America through the legal courts and process, right? So they want to stop him from running for president because they can't stand him, just like they couldn't stand Nero. Anyway, I don't know how this is going to play out. Obviously, I have no idea what's going to happen in the future. All I'm saying is that it looks like, if these parallels keep on continuing, it looks like we're going to have, I guess, the year of 4 presidents. I don't know if it's literally going to be 4 presidents or what, but we're going to have a year of incredible turmoil, political turmoil. It's going to culminate with a Vespasian-like character who will settle down and bring peace to the empire again. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. Again, I have no idea. I'm not claiming to know what's going to happen. All I'm simply doing is just logically looking at Roman history, seeing that it's paralleled the whole way anyway by now anyway, and just deducing that I guess it probably would continue to do so because it has so far. So that's all I'm doing. So I guess we'll see. All right. I hope this wasn't too controversial. I think it's interesting, obviously, and I will talk to you next time.